Well, who doesn't love pizza? But we're going to kick it up a nutritional notch by adding some beans and some greens. So today we are making pizza beans and we are adding some greens to it to really elevate the nutritional value, but without compromising flavor. Welcome, I'm Judy Matusky. I am a registered dietitian and culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. Happy to be here, cooking fast and light as always. We are using as few ingredients as we can to not compromise flavor, but to make cooking a little bit more easy, a little bit simpler. All right, so let's get started. I have a full lineup of ingredients that we're going to use. You know, there's a little more than that 5-ish, but most of these ingredients you probably have in your pantry. So it's not like it's, you're going to probably run out and buy a whole bunch of different things. I just love this dish because it's so fast, it's so easy, and it's one of those perfect things to do when you're not sure what you want to have, or maybe you're thinking, oh, pizza sounds really good, but you want something just a little bit more nutritious. All right, so we're going to put together a very quick sauce, and the sauce basically is just going to be garlic, some anchovies, red pepper, some canned tomatoes, and we're going to bring that together real quickly. Then we're going to add some beans, we're going to add some greens, and then we're going to finish it off in the broiler to get it nice and kind of browned and gooey. All right, so let's get started. I have my burner on here, so I'm going to warm that up. You do want an oven-proof skillet because this is going to go in the oven under the broiler. So if you have cast iron, this is a Le Creuset cast iron, any skillet that you have, just make sure that it can really take the heat in the oven because that's important because we are going to finish with that step. All right, so we're going to go with about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in a cold pan. So you don't want your olive oil, you don't want to really heat your pan up and then add your olive oil. So you want to sort of start cold, add your olive oil. And now we're going to add, and this is your flavor preference, I'm adding about 2 fairly large chopped cloves of garlic. If you really like garlic, you can certainly add more than that. And then all we really want to do here is we really just want to lightly saute this garlic. Brown it just a tiny, tiny bit, but we certainly don't want it to burn because we know that garlic, when it burns, is just not very pleasant. So it's already sizzling. I'm going to let this go maybe just like a minute or so, just to sort of get it, just sort of brown it up and to sort of flavor that oil a little. And then we're going to add our anchovies. And remember, anchovies just add a really rich depth of flavor. So it's not really fishy, so you don't really have to worry about that. I'm going to add, I think the recipe says about half of a tin. I'm going to add, it's probably about that. I think I'll add about 5 fillets. And remember that these fillets, if you're not used to cooking with anchovies, they're just going to cook right down. They're just going to cook down, and they sort of dissolve right in the oil. So once you add them, kind of just stir them around a little bit. I'm going to move I'm going to move this off heat just a second here because this burner is really hot. I don't want to burn my garlic. So you're just going to stir them around, and they really just break down and dissolve. And they're going to just dissolve right into the sauce, and you're not going to know they're there. You're not going to see them. If you're not used to cooking with anchovies, it just adds a real rich, intense flavor when you're trying to make a quick sauce like this, because sometimes it takes longer to get a really intense tomato sauce flavor when you're cooking the sauce. But when you're trying to do it a little bit quicker, so these are some little hacks that you can do, and that is adding anchovies is just one way. All right, so I'm going to bring it back, turn it down a little bit, and now I'm going to add maybe just half a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. This is really, again, up to you, depending on how much heat you want. I just want a little background heat in this, and we're just going to stir that around. And now that this is pretty well, I can show you that you can see that the anchovies really just broke down right into that garlic. They're just sort of gonna just disappear into the sauce. So without this getting too much hotter, I'm gonna add some tomatoes. And this is a 14-ounce can. This brand of Muti tomatoes, I love them. I think their flavor is great. It's basically just tomatoes. They don't add anything else to it. These are little cherry tomatoes, which are great because they're really kind of nice and sweet. You could just use crushed tomatoes, a 14-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Any tomato you have in your pantry is fine. I just happen to love these, and I was at the market and they had them, so All right, so what's nice now is that as we're adding these tomatoes, I'm going to crank the heat back up a little bit because we really want this to cook down a little bit and thicken just slightly. But this helps now to cool down the garlic. So now we don't have to. It just shot me here, squirted up right at me. Now we don't have to worry about that garlic burning since we just added these tomatoes. All right. So I'm just sort of. I'm going to take my fork and just poke them a little bit. And they are certainly full of juice, these little guys. All right, and then they're gonna cook down. And while they're cooking down, all right, I'm gonna get the heat back up because again, this is just a real quick sauce that we're doing. Let me just stir that. And now, when you're, we're gonna add greens to this. And my green of choice is just, I have spinach. I just picked up a bag of fresh spinach. Baby spinach would be great. It would just be super easy. This is not baby spinach, so what I did was I just chopped it a little bit just to break it down so it'll cook a little bit more quickly. But any type of green that you love, baby spinach, escarole, Swiss chard, if you wanted to go full margarita pizza greens, you could really just add a bunch of fresh basil in here. We're gonna add some at the end and then again at the end. So really any green that you like. The original recipe, I found this on Bon Appetit, I think in their healthy-ish column, and they were using broccoli rabe, and that recipe was just a little more steps than I really wanted it to have, and I thought we could maybe simplify it a little bit. And I like broccoli rabe, but I don't honestly love it. To me, it's just, I do like bitter greens, but that's just so bitter. So I decided just to go ahead and substitute the spinach. And you know, with this, what we're trying, you know, again, we're looking at ways to bring super powerhouses into our eating plan, and this is just so great because not only are we adding beans, which we all know we should be eating a lot more beans every week, it also adds the greens, so you're getting both, you know, it's like, you know, 2 for 1, so can't beat that. And then some great lycopene from our tomato sauce, which is also a nice little benefit. All right, so these are cooking really well. I just kind of want to thicken it up a little bit. You don't have to go crazy with it. We don't have to cook it down too much, but this will just kind of mellow out the tomato flavor and kind of let everything, all these flavors kind of come together. The anchovies are completely gone. You can't see them at all. Nowhere to be found in this sauce. All right, now let's add it doesn't really matter the order. I'm gonna go ahead and add my chopped spinach because I already have this already chopped up. If it's baby spinach, no need to chop it. We're just gonna add it in. It's, you know, maybe it might be a full bag of baby spinach depending on how big the bag is. I didn't actually measure this, but I'm gonna say that this is probably maybe 4 to 6 cups of fresh spinach that I'm adding in. And you know, as you cook spinach, it just totally disappears into nothing. So even though you start with a lot, and you can start with a fair amount, if it cooks down, then just add a little bit more if you feel like you want a little bit more green in here. But I think this is probably just about the right amount. All right, so we'll get that down and let that wilt just a little bit. And then I have 2 cans of cannellini beans, which are just like white kidney beans. You could certainly use other beans. Don't limit yourself. If you don't have white beans in your pantry and you really want to make something like this, substitute another bean, fine. But the white cannellini beans just are super creamy, and that's what I love about them. It calls for two cans of beans. So you could get away with just 1 if that's all you have. Don't worry about it. I'm going to use, you know, this is a smaller skillet, so I'm not going to show if I'm going to put all the full 2 cans in here. But you can, certainly. All right, so let me just toss this around. And all we're doing now is we're just finishing the wilting of the spinach. We're just going to warm the beans a little bit, and it's just gorgeous. You know, it's just like such gorgeous, the colors are beautiful. All right, and now let's just do a little, let this sort of cook off. And you don't really have to, like you said, you start with like either crushed tomatoes or these you know, canned cherry tomatoes or even canned whole tomatoes for that matter would be fine. Just kind of break them up a little bit. They kind of, you get just the right amount of sauce because you don't want them just to be overly saucy. It's really very thick. It's not super saucy. So that is just the perfect amount of liquid. So I'm just going to use a little bit of fresh ground pepper on top. And I'm not going to salt it because those anchovies are really salty, but you may want to, but I would just wait and sort of taste it and then decide if you need a little bit of extra seasoning. So you may want to, you know, add a little bit more, you might want to add a little bit more salt. All right, so let's just get this together. All right, now the final thing that we're going to do is we are now going to add the mozzarella. So I'm going to turn this all the way down. I was at the supermarket and this is something you learn this all the time. When it comes to dairy fat, there's this huge debate, you know, does it elevate cholesterol? If that's a concern for cardiovascular disease, does it not? It's still back and forth. I think the consensus still is that we really want to still reduce dairy fat in the diet, particularly saturated fat. If you are concerned about cardiovascular disease or you have elevated cholesterol, using a lower fat dairy is still the recommendation. I was looking at this supermarket. You know what? I'm going to just go ahead and do this, and then put it in the broiler, and we'll keep talking about we'll keep talking about this cheese. I'm using fresh mozzarella. I think the recipe calls for a low moisture. Fresh mozzarella has a little bit more moisture in it, and so when you put it under the broiler, it may not brown quite as much as a lower moisture cheese would. Mozzarella cheese, but it's fine. And I wanted to specifically get it because I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the differences between fresh mozzarella, low moisture mozzarella, and the part skim mozzarella, and the regular, you know, whole milk mozzarella from a nutritional perspective. Because I kind of learned something yesterday when I was at the market. All right, so I'm not shredding this because it's fresh, and to try to shred fresh mozzarella, it's sort of a mess. You know, it's really hard to do. I'm simply tearing it, and I'm going to just put, you know, I'm just putting little dollops on top. The recipe says for maybe about a cup, whatever, you know, whatever you want to do. You don't have to, you know, necessarily go overboard with cheese. I know we love it, but you know, we can certainly use a little bit less. And then I'm just going to finish this with a little sprinkle of Parmesan cheese, and then I already have some freshly grated Parmesan cheese, so I'm just going to sprinkle that on top. And then what we're going to do is we are going to just pop this under the broiler. I have my broiler already heated up. So this is just going to go in the broiler, so you can see. Isn't it gorgeous? I mean, this is so fun. I think, you know, kids will love this. It's great to serve if you have some friends over the weekend. All right, I'm popping it in the broiler, and this is the thing with broilers. You know, if you don't cook regularly with broilers, you really got to keep an eye on them. And it depends on how close you have it to the heat. This is probably maybe like 3 or 4 inches down from the heat source. But you really want to keep an eye on it because it will burn pretty quickly. So it's only going to take a few minutes. So as I'm talking, I'm going to make sure I check on that. Let's go back to the mozzarella. So if you're trying to keep your saturated fat intake a little bit on the lower side, which is probably not a bad idea for most of us, I was surprised. That the part skim, the low moisture, which is denser, you know, mozzarella cheese, it's easier to grate, was higher in saturated fat than this fresh mozzarella. So, and it's mostly because there's more moisture in here, so it's not as dense, so you don't get quite as much fat or saturated fat per ounce. So in the hierarchy of the least amount of saturated fat, the fresh whole milk mozzarella was lowest. Then it was the part skim mozzarella, low moisture, and then it was the whole milk low moisture mozzarella. But the difference between the part skim low moisture mozzarella and the whole milk low moisture mozzarella, it's a mouthful, wasn't much. There wasn't a big difference. It's like 0.5 gram of saturated fat. So sometimes you really need to read labels, and it may vary brand to brand. This was just like, I forget the brand I was actually looking at, but it might vary, but in this particular case, it was, you know, pretty much, there wasn't much difference. So I think from a flavor perspective, that's just something to keep in mind. If you really are, if you prefer the full whole milk mozzarella because of the flavor, I would go ahead and use it because there's really not a huge difference between the part skim and the whole milk. But you might want to compare brands because some may have a bigger difference and that might sway which brand you want to use or which one you want to use. But of all of them, I would go with the fresh mozzarella. For me, I love the creaminess of it. It is, you can't really grate it as well, but it is just fresher, especially with salads, in the summer with fresh tomatoes, and even in, lasagnas or any kind of pasta dishes where you need the mozzarella. I love the fresh, so that's my choice. I think that's always going to be my go-to because, again, it's just the lowest in saturated fat anyway. All right, so let's just take a peek at the cheese is melting. I probably won't. Gonna keep it in there for just another second or two. I probably won't get it totally browned up because I'm not gonna keep it in there that long. All right, fresh basil from my husband's winter garden in our greenhouse. It is doing exceptionally well. He just gave me a tour of his greenhouse garden just the other day, and the basil is growing so well. It looks gorgeous. He's got lots of great things up there. Lots of different lettuce. So I'm just cutting this with my knife because this is just, with my scissors, my kitchen shears. This basil is just so tender. I don't even want to chop it because I don't want to bruise it. So here's a whole big bowl of it. Isn't it absolutely gorgeous? So I'll be enjoying that with these pizza beans for the next probably couple days here. All right, so I'm just gonna get this all chopped up. All right, and now let's pull out our pizza beans. Let me show you. All right, they've got all nice and melted, right? Look how gorgeous they are. I'm gonna just pop them over here on the stove. And then I'm gonna take the basil here. I'm just gonna sprinkle it right on top. And then let me move some of this off because I really wanna show you how to sort of plate this. And so what we're gonna do is, you can just take a plate. I have a bowl, because there's two ways you can do this. I have some toasted sourdough bread that I toasted off just a little bit earlier. You can use, definitely want a whole nice crusty whole grain bread or a sourdough bread would be great. Then you can do one of two ways. You can just put this on a plate and then you can top it with your pizza beans, maybe a teeny drizzle of olive oil on top if you want. And that would be great because there's your little, this little, wedge of pizza. But if you also, a kind of fun way to do it is to just take your toast and then cut it in, thicker strips. And then when you plate up the pizza beans, all right, it's nice and. Oh, there's that really good. Look at that cheese. Look at the string on the cheese. Isn't that great? Doesn't that look amazing? All right. So when you can just plate a little bit put some in a plate, and then look at all the strings. It's from that beautiful fresh mozzarella. All right, and then you would serve it with the little toast strips, alongside. And so then all you do is you just take a little bit of your beans and you put them up on your toast, and then you take a bite. So it's absolutely gorgeous. So you can either just serve it on top of the toast or cut your toast into little strips and dip it that way. All right, pizza beans, super easy, super fast, but just elevated nutritionally than just typical pizza. And it's just kind of a fun way. It makes a great, any meal. Again, I think breakfast, I think we don't have to have sweet things for breakfast, so this would be a great savory breakfast, but certainly works for any meal. Stay tuned. If you like these videos, please share them. Again, we're always saying, we love to expand our community, and please share them with friends and family. And we are going to be doing some single session culinary nutrition workshops that are coming up in April and in May. So if you want us to let you know about them, please pop over to athensnutrition.com and just sign up for our free newsletter so that you'll get all of that information and the updates of when our culinary nutrition workshops are coming up. We just completed a 4-week workshop for women just a couple weeks ago, and so we're going to start up again in April. So just again, athensnutrition.com, sign up for our free newsletter if you want to receive more information on that. All right, I'll be back next week. It's gonna actually be March next Thursday, so that's exciting. We're getting closer to spring, right? And we will be doing a really good green goddess dressing. All right, stay well till then. I'll see you in a week.